the villains finally turn the tide in this war, and it's to grave importance that the heroes overtake them before it's too late. That is what this episode brings us, so let's talk more about it. Hey guys, how's it going? It is your boy, Manga Man Drew, and I'm here to do my breakdown for My Hero Academia, Season 7, Episode 15. There's a lot that I want to break down with this episode, from the major plot beats to the smaller details that really add to the animation and adaptation of this series when it comes to comparing the manga. All that and more will be discussed right now, so let's dive right into it. So, to start out, the episode is titled Butterfly Effect, which takes its name from manga chapter 374, and this episode covers chapters 372, pages 11 onward, as well as chapters 373, 374, and 375 up to page 13. And the episode starts off with is a recap of the previous episodes of Spinner's speech and him diving into the hospital, where we dive right into some of the most emotional bits of the episode when it comes to the heteromorphs invading the hospital as they begin to feel regret after seeing the doctors try and protect their patients. And afterwards, Spinner runs to save Kurogiri like in the manga. However, the edit animation as well as cutting in between the real world and Spinner's inner fantasy really hits harder in the anime as we see Spinner is alone as Present Mic approaches and attacks him. And from there, we do cut to the past, which is going to be something that is very prominent in this episode as we're cutting from the present to the past to really tie in events that are happening at the same time. But this cut is cutting a few minutes during the fighting between Shoji, Koda, and Present Mic against the heteromorphs right after Spinner has broken into the hospital. And as they are fighting in this moment, Shoji is about to be attacked but is saved by one of the rioters that entered the hospital. And how this specific pig-like heteromorph expresses his anger and how he doesn't know if what they are doing is right, but that he does not want to hurt the people. As we see that the heteromorphs that are exiting the building have this dejected expression on their face. And from there, we do get to hear Shoji's touching speech that shows his support for the heteromorphs and why they feel this way and advocating for a better tomorrow. And that this scene in both the anime and the manga is important because it shows that violence is not a real solution for change and that communication and education is, and this just shows a great lesson. Even to the point where both in the anime and the manga, we see one of the heroes actually approaching one of the quote-unquote rioters and apologizing in earnest. So I really did think that this scene was adapted extremely well from the manga to the anime, except for one small part. And there is a weird animation quirk of how big the pig man heteromorph's hand is when he's trying to protect Shoji from that attack, and that is very disproportionately big from what we see later on within that same sequence. But hey, there's a lot more blood in that scene than there was in the manga, so I can't really complain that much. But from there, we do get another touching moment that is going to dive more into what Kurogiri is going to be doing when it comes to his role in the final battle, where we get a very nice moment of Present Mic, aka Yamada, reflecting on Shirokumo as well as the backstory as well as the interactions with their students, and how it implies that he will destroy Kurogiri for the better of society as well as for his friend, in reference to Aizawa, really adding to the characterization of Yamada Present Mic in this part of the story, and showing how far he's willing to go, even if it means that it could potentially hurt or kill a friend that used to be a part of his life. And how this also ties into the same moment where Spinner is also reflecting on his reasonings for why he wanted to follow Tomura, and that at the same moment, they both take action as we get the amazing scene from the manga of Spinner's resolve as he flashes back to all of the moments that he connected with Tomura as he's able to awaken Kurogiri with the hand that belonged to one of Tomura's family members. And because of Spinner's actions and Yamada not acting quickly enough, Kurogiri is awakened as we also get to see part of Shirokumo's face as he declares how his goal is to protect Tomura, and Kurogiri consumes both himself and Yamada, which is more clearly shown in the anime versus what was in the manga. And this is where the tide turns to the villain's favor, especially for what we're going to be getting and seeing with the next part of the episode. Because from here, we get to see a young African-American woman in Washington State and that this individual is actually named Meryl, but that she's going to be playing a bigger role when it comes to the world building of My Hero Academia later on, so I will introduce her name here. But even with that, what she's doing is performing a newscast and pretty much explaining that how the weather changes in Japan is affecting the entire world, and how it's shown via flashbacks how all of this is occurring due to just the firepower of the Todoroki family of 3 individuals, tying into the idea about how one singular person can change the world, as she declares her distaste and not support for the state trying to appease to the whims of All For One, but how the anime adds a very cool scene of her holding up a sign to emphasize her support against All For One, saying no All For One on the paper, which was not something that was in the manga and anime only, but it's these small moments added to the anime that I point out in these breakdowns that really show how these small changes can improve the story as a whole. So yeah, I can't wait to see more of this weather lady, because let me just say, she is extremely attractive. But speaking of All For One, this is where we're going to be getting more of the other villains as we cut over to different locations. Where we cut over to Kamino after the declaration of mail when it comes to the Todoroki family, as Toya, aka Dabi, begins to question if he can even reach his father before his body is unusable and unstable, as we see Shosho is trying to keep him there. But unfortunately, Skeptic gives him hope as a portal opens up right in front of him. As we also cut to UA, where Monoma is trying to stand strong for his friends and the heroes fighting against Tomura in this moment, as we do get an added moment of transition of All For One smiling that was not in the manga as his speech begins, as he declares his plan with Spinner with a hidden mic in the palm of that hand, as the portal of Kurogiri comes to where Aizawa is with present mic in tow, as we also get to see Dabi as well as Twice, aka Toga, coming through a portal at Gunga Mountain to the chagrin of the heroes. And this is where I have said multiple times the tide has officially turned to the villain side. And I will point out that in this scene, we know that the individual that is being Twice is actually Toga, even though we know that Toga can mimic the voices of the people she transforms into. However, when it comes to the scene, all it shows is that while the voice is very similar to what we hear Twice's voice as, how it's being sounded and enunciated is very much more like Toga, showing that these clones may just be Toga disguised as Twice and not Twice himself. But we're going to get a little bit more clarification from the anime to make sure that that is actually the case. And as we are approaching the end of the episode with another jump into the past, this time we cut over to Okuto Island, where we get to see the confrontation between Toga as well as Uraraka, where the anime does add an additional scene of Froppy fighting against a random villain to transition into her fighting alongside Uraraka against Toga. And that this is one of the few added details in this episode when it comes to this sequence of action, where we are shown more and added details that includes Gang Orca fighting against one of the Nomu, the villains being restrained, as well as seeing more fights with the villains, such as the heroes going up against the Nomu and clearly showing them going up against Moonfish. Also, I want to point out this scene where we get an added scene that shows the other characters next to Uraraka who are declared to be sensory type quirk users and how they help in the fight against Toga, as we see them actually enacting their quirks that are able to direct Uraraka to Toga's location, which is very necessary when it comes to the technique that Toga has, which allows her to, in essence, hide her presence, but she cannot hide it from multiple people at once. So I really like this addition because it really adds to the fight and really shows that there's a little bit more thought taken to how these characters are fighting within the world of My Hero Academia. Also, something else that is very interesting that ties from what we got in the manga is that we get to see Toga being a little bit more analytical in how she's fighting, as is explained via flashbacks. And something else that I want to bring up is that while this episode has had a lot of flashbacks that were not necessarily in the manga, the flashbacks that we got very much emphasize what is being said and shown, as well as them not being very intrusive when it comes to the storytelling as a whole. And now that we know that Toga in this moment is very much more strategic after the death of Twice, it becomes apparent as she was able to trick Froppy into forcing one of the Nomu to attack Froppy, which gave Toga enough time to disguise herself as Froppy and eventually intake the blood of Twice. Where it's at this moment she begins to double is when the portal of Kurogiri appears to take her to Gunga Mountain. And as the portal opens and Toga realizes that she has 30 or 40 minutes left for the dead man's parade, and as she's taken to all of the other battlefields, Uraraka tries to stop her and she wants to talk to Toga about romance, where we see the scene animated from the manga of her looking sad and phasing into the portal, and how we really get to see how the animation really adds to this moment, showing the transition from her being shocked to being saddened, which is a lot more clearly stated and shown in the anime versus the manga. And that once again, this shows the strength of animation can have to make scenes hit more in the anime that may not necessarily be the case in the manga. And the episode pretty much ends in the present timeline with a whole bunch of CGI Twices that look extremely well animated for being CGI, consuming the mountains of Gunga and the entirety of the battlefield, as we get very much the confirmation from hearing the voices that these Twices are just Toga transformed into Twice and using Twice's quirk, showing that while she's in the state, she can do whatever Twice can do potentially. But yeah, that's pretty much the episode as well as my breakdown. I think that this was a solid episode that followed probably one of my favorite episodes of this season. And I think that this is really going to be adding more to what we're going to be getting in the next episode, which is going to potentially be the return of Tomoe Shigaraki. But hey, let me ask you this. What did you think of the episode? Did you like it? Did you dislike it? And how did you feel about it as a whole? Leave your thoughts down below, and don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel for more content like this. Do all that cool jazz, and hopefully I'll be able to catch you in my next video. Goodbye!